Reeves, Park, Eder and Grimek, these titans from the Silver Era developed phenomenally strong physiques that have had many questioning whether the Silver Era bodybuilders used steroids, specifically testosterone, as it was coincidentally discovered and synthesized during the Silver Era. This debate has been going on for years. Some are completely convinced, whilst others claim that the Silver Era bodybuilders were natural. Well, today I'm going to present a letter that demonstrates that John Grimek was inquiring about testosterone in 1943, along with advertisements of supposed anabolic substances that appeared in bodybuilding magazines and an interview from a bodybuilder and pharmacist from the Silver Era who claims that Silver Era bodybuilders used testosterone. The evidence I present to you today is the first time anything like this has been presented on YouTube and proves beyond any doubt that Silver Era bodybuilders did in fact know about anabolic steroids. In my quest for the truth, I have approached Professor John D. Fair from the Stark Center and searched my magazine collection for information that really does shed more light on the topic. I present this information for the first time on social media in a completely unbiased format to inform the Iron Game community. Although it is very tempting to speculate and come to conclusions almost instantly, like I am sure so many will, I will ask you to stay to the end of the video and listen to my opinion and to consider all the facts. And then if you wish to draw your own conclusions, by all means do so. I first learned of a supposed letter written by John Grimek in 1943 after reading Muscle, Smoke and Mirrors and Muscletown, USA, where John Grimek apparently asked about testosterone, which I found rather interesting. I had been searching and asking for a scan or transcript of it, and only until recently, last week in fact, did I finally receive a transcript from Professor John D. Fair from the Stark Center for Physical Culture and Sports, to whom I am very grateful for this extremely kind gesture, so I thank you very, very much, Professor John D. Fair. According to Professor Fair, he transcribed the letter from the original letter at Dr. John Ziegler's home in Olney. That is, Dr. Ziegler is the original source of this letter, and yes, this is the same Dr. Ziegler that was known for the first dianabol experiments. Here is the transcript of the letter. B. Jeffs to Grimek, January 27th, 1943. Memorandum to Mr. Sartorius. So, not sure who is being referred to here as Mr. Sartorius, but memorandum simply refers to a written message. Also important to note is that the letter is dated for 1943 after John Grimek had won his two Mr. Americas in 1940 and 1941. Methyl testosterone was originally obtained from male urine and is an excretion product. It is a derivative of testosterone which is produced with the androgens in the testes by acid hydrolysis. Recently, methyl testosterone was prepared synthetically. Now, I just want to also add a comment here. Okay, so these three sentences refer to the first synthesis of testosterone and the synthesis of methyl testosterone in 1935. Although it seems that this Mr. B. Jeffs doesn't quite know about the history of testosterone very well, androsterone was first obtained from male urine, not testosterone. Continuing with the letter. It is of special interest because of its effectiveness when administered orally. According to Grolman, I'm assuming this is a study, testosterone itself is only about 1/20th as active when administered orally as when injected, but in the form of medical derivative, the oral activity is substantially increased. Methyl testosterone is available commercially under several trade names including Neo, Hombriel, and Cretin. Now these next three sentences focus on the ways testosterone can be taken or administered, and finally, under which commercial names it can be found. Let's look now at the bottom of the letter. Note by Grimek at bottom of above letter. Friend of mine sent me this when I first inquired about it. Note above date. I read some copy, medical, in parentheses, on it, and wanted to know the whys and wherefores. Signed, John C. Grimek. At the bottom of the letter, John Grimek signs the letter and states that his friend B. Jeffs had sent him this information and he had first read about testosterone from a medical pamphlet of some sort, and that he, John Grimek, wanted to know the whys and wherefores of methyl testosterone. Wow, right? Really, really interesting. I mean, this letter just opens a whole can of worms. This letter actually came out prior, let me repeat, prior to the often cited Paul de Cruyff's The Male Hormone book that came out in 1945. So this letter alone destroys any notion that Silver Era bodybuilders did not know about testosterone prior to 1945. However, let's make something very clear. This letter has often been quoted online as being from a doctor, which is taken out of context. This letter was provided to Professor Fair by Dr. John Ziegler, who kept it all these years. This letter that John Grimek received was not written by a doctor, and it is not a prescription. The letter was given to him by his friend, a Mr. B. Jeffs, who I doubt was a doctor because he got several facts wrong regarding the history of testosterone in the letter, and this is the problem with trusting online forums. What the letter does prove, however, is the undeniable fact that the connection was there. Silver Era bodybuilders did know about steroids. Now, before I give my opinions and further research, which I am absolutely itching to present to you, I want to continue showing you more information that I have found. I did follow up on the preparations mentioned in the letter by John Grimek's friend B. Jeffs and found that in fact methyl testosterone was being sold under the name neohombriols. I couldn't find it under the name Creton though. Here are the preparations of methyl testosterone that B. Jeffs was referring to, and we can see that methyl test was being sold under the name neohombriol and was available in 10 and 25 milligram tablets, which were taken orally. Interestingly, this drug was available worldwide, as I found the preparation available in Italian. Hence, the preparation was also available in Europe, which makes sense seeing that Roche, who produced it, is in Switzerland. Even more interesting is that it was also prescribed and advertised to women with sexual problems as an ointment. For men, though, if we read the medical indication of methyl testosterone at the time, which means for what methyl testosterone was actually prescribed to men for, we clearly can read that it was for dependable hormone therapy with potent androgenic, not anabolic, androgenic action. Now, some people may argue in stating that John Grimek and perhaps other Silver Era bodybuilders knew about testosterone even earlier than the early 1940s. I mean, we've just proven just now that Silver Era bodybuilders definitely knew about testosterone in the early 1940s, but some people claim that Silver Era bodybuilders knew about testosterone before the 1940s, because apparently methyl testosterone was mentioned in Bob Hoffman's magazine Strength and Health in 1938, and I have read this in online forums, which I admit I don't like referring to at all because more often than not they are rubbish as a source of reference. A simple Google search of 1938 Strength and Health magazine testosterone pulls up several quotations of the accusation I just mentioned. According to these online forums, there was a letter to the editor in a Strength and Health magazine in 1938. Now, I can tell you that I have searched and read every single letter to the editor from 1938 Strength and Health magazine and found absolutely nothing to back up this claim. Not a single mention of testosterone, and just to make sure, I even asked Professor Fair, who also told me that he has never found a reference for testosterone in Strength and Health magazine in the 1930s, so this myth can be thrown out the window. However, and this is a big however, I did find proof that the interest in hormone therapy and testosterone was alive and well in the mid to late 1930s, with ads of hormone therapy, glandular therapy, and all sorts of elixirs and supplements such as Vitapon for thin, weak men, used to build muscular tissue and virile strength, Hormonex, an extract of vital glands, one product even called Testosterone that claimed to contain the essence of life, and these products were supposed to enhance health, strength, and virility, and that you could gain 10 to 25 pounds of muscle in 30 days, double your strength, and other outlandish claims. These ads I found in British Health and Strength magazine, a muscle magazine, starting from the mid to late 1930s and later in the early 1940s. And to answer the question as to whether I have found any mention of methyl testosterone at all in any muscle mag in the 1930s or 1940s, the answer is definitely no. These advertisements of elixirs and gland extracts did run from as early as January 1935, and this was well before the discovery of testosterone. Therefore, they certainly did not contain preparations of methyl testosterone. As they are described, they are at best glandular extracts, and most likely poor ones at that. However, it does demonstrate that companies were pushing hormonal therapy and products like testicular extracts to the general fitness community and bodybuilders even as early as 1935. It is no wonder then that bodybuilders were asking about methyl testosterone by the early 1940s. As far as I am aware, this is the first time anyone has demonstrated, at least on YouTube, that muscle mags were pushing such products on bodybuilders. So far, the only evidence we have ever seen has come from medical journals and newspaper articles, which the general layperson and public may read, of course, and sure, a bodybuilder here and there may find the newspaper interesting and raise an eyebrow about such ads in a newspaper. But another thing is for these products to be pushed on bodybuilders, which really demonstrates that bodybuilders were given the knowledge of hormones and their importance to health, strength, and muscle building since the mid-1930s. Now, as a final interesting finding, I found this interview in the Florida Weight Man magazine, volume 2, number 1 from the 1960s. Within an article called Tissue Drugs is presented with a letter from pharmacist and Silver Era bodybuilder Bill Barrett, who goes on to explain that he had been using anabolic steroids since the 1950s and that they enhanced his physical development and overall health and vitality. Quote, "My experience with anabolic hormones has been very fruitful. I've been using them for almost 10 years now, and I can honestly say that they have benefited me greatly. I will soon be 46 and find my physical development and total vitality to be on a higher plane with much less effort than it was 10 years ago. I firmly believe that aging is chemical and that someday, via hormone therapy, we'll be able to extend the prime of life far beyond what it is today." End quote. He then goes on and makes the following accusation. Quote, "I could tell you more about the history of anabolic hormones, how they are derived, etc., but it would make too long of a letter. I would, however, like to bring one more item to your attention. I know of 3 Mr. Americas and at least 1 Mr. Florida, also several movie stars who rose to glory when taking these hormones. In fact, one of the greatest and best known of all bodybuilders became Mr. America in the 1940s after taking testosterone, the parent hormone from which the more recent anabolic hormones have been derived. He later became Mr. Universe, and even today, 20 years later, he is still considered by many to be the greatest of them all. In closing, I look forward to seeing this letter presented to your readers, end quote. Wow, what an accusation. Here, Bill Barrett is essentially accusing Steve Reeves, famous movie star who was Mr. America in the 1940s and later Mr. Universe, amongst other bodybuilders who also became movie stars, as well as other Mr. Americas from the 1940s, basically accusing numerous bodybuilders from the 1940s taking testosterone to win their titles, and this accusation was made in the 1960s, well before the fake natural phenomenon ever existed. So the question we are all asking is, are these accusations true or not? Has the evidence I just provided proved once and for all that Silver Era bodybuilders were juiced to the gills? As I mentioned earlier, it is easy to speculate. What we can definitely say is the following. Silver Era bodybuilders were aware of the importance of hormonal and glandular health as early as the mid-1930s, as products were obviously being advertised in muscle mags worldwide, with elixirs and potions containing God knows what, some claiming to be glandular extracts with names similar to testosterone, but these products were likely not preparations of methyltestosterone. 2. During the early 1940s, Silver Era bodybuilder John Grimek and perhaps others were inquiring about methyltestosterone to find out what it was and what it did. This was definitely a new topic of conversation amongst bodybuilders. The connection was there. 3. Oral methyltestosterone preparations were available containing 10 to 25 milligrams of methyltestosterone. And sure, injectable forms were also available, but I'll get to this topic in a minute. 4. Finally, I have also presented a rather controversial accusation made by a pharmacist that also happened to be a bodybuilder from the Silver Era, namely Bill Barrett, accusing Mr. Americas from the 1940s, including Steve Reeves and other bodybuilders and movie stars, of taking testosterone. That is one hell of an accusation, especially coming from 1960, but yet it's an accusation. And only that, no different to the hundreds of accusations that have occurred since. This doesn't necessarily prove anything. So what do I conclude from all these findings? Well, for those of you that are dying to point the finger at Silver Era bodybuilders and call them fake naturals, I will be disappointing you, because in my opinion, this is not hard evidence. I repeat, not hard evidence incriminating Silver Era bodybuilders of taking steroids. It definitely demonstrates, though, that the conversation of testosterone was present. Of that I have absolutely no doubt anymore, and I will admit that although in previous videos I've stated the opposite, I admit that I was wrong about that now. We can clearly see that the topic of glandular and hormonal therapy was plastered all over the muscle mags. Bodybuilders were inquiring about it, however, we still don't have any convincing proof that they were orally administering steroids or injecting themselves. Does the possibility exist that they were perhaps experimenting with testosterone? Perhaps yes, perhaps no. The findings I have shown today are not damning enough, though. They are not conclusive enough. All I can conclude was that the awareness, that the conversation, the inquiry, the curiosity about testosterone was definitely there. But that is all, and it is undeniable. I know that many will not care about my opinion and jump to conclusions, and sure, you have a right to your own opinions, but if you will hear me out, I will explain why I can't accuse Silver Era bodybuilders of taking steroids to enhance their physiques. That is what everyone is accusing them of, right? That Silver Era bodybuilders took testosterone to enhance their muscular development. So now I want to present you with some science, as well as to Professor Jan Todd's research to back up why I still think Silver Era bodybuilders did not take testosterone to enhance their muscular development. That's what I'm getting at. First, let's look at the history of testosterone rather briefly. We all know that testosterone was isolated in 1935 from 100 kilograms of bull testicles. However, soon after methyltestosterone was created in 1939 and accepted for clinical use, prostate cancer was found to be related to testosterone levels in 1941, and oral methyltestosterones were found to be toxic to the liver in 1950. Because of liver toxicity issues, parenteral methods were experimented with using pellets as early as 1937, and these are still used today. However, I see no silver era bodybuilder studded with testosterone pellets. Further, these initial preparations had an effective half-life of only 10 minutes. Nevertheless, esters were created that extended the relatively short half-life of initial testosterone preparations, with the creation of testosterone propionate in 1936. Even then, the half-life of testosterone propionate was only 1 to 2 days long. By the early 1950s, however, testosterone enanthate was created, with substitution necessary every 2 to 3 weeks. And although still not possessing optimal pharmacokinetics, here we see finally the creation of a much more potent, long-lasting testosterone preparation, and this became the standard choice for the next 50 years. Now let's examine this short history of testosterone in context to the silver era bodybuilders and the possibility of experimentation with testosterone. The now well-known paper from the New England Journal of Medicine titled The Effects of Supraphysiological Doses of Testosterone on Muscle Size and Strength in Normal Men demonstrates that the weekly application of 600 milligrams of testosterone increased both fat-free mass and muscle size as well as strength, whilst endocrinologists would recommend between 40 to 200 milligrams of testosterone per week to simply keep testosterone at normal physiological levels. And now we've got a range. So if we put all of this into context and considering that oral methyltestosterone tablets were available that delivered up to 25 milligrams per day, silver era bodybuilders would have had to take 24 tablets a week to reach the approximate supraphysiological 600 milligram weekly dose to see muscular changes in their physiques. And of course, all of this is theoretical. 24 tablets, yeah, that's a lot of tablets. That's 3 or 4 a day, with the knowledge that it could put them at risk of prostate cancer, and with the knowledge later on that they would soon suffer from liver toxicity. I mean, that is why injectable esters were created in the first place, because of the toxicity and ineffectiveness of oral methyltestosterone. In my opinion, the risks far outweighed the benefits. Sure, oral methyltestosterone taken as 10 milligram tablets once a day, or every couple of days to give a total of maybe 50 to 100 milligrams a week as prescribed for a hypogonadal man to bring about the masculine features and characteristics necessary for the full development of a hypogonadal man. And perhaps this dose would not have been as toxic as the supraphysiological dose necessary to bring about changes in muscular development. So in my opinion, the thought of a silver era bodybuilder like John Grimek downing a whole bottle of oral methyltestosterone a week for an extended period of time just doesn't make sense. He would have definitely gotten very, very sick. Others will of course argue that injectable methods like testosterone propionate were available, but as mentioned, the half-life of these preparations were very short, with a biological half-life of just 1 to 2 days. Could have Grimek experimented with such preparations? As I said before, perhaps he did, or perhaps he didn't. I don't think he did though. But now let me bring up one other point. Let's say that John Grimek did experiment with injectable testosterone propionate in the 1940s, although he has never mentioned this drug in his letter. If it worked so well, then why try testosterone again in the 1950s? It is well documented that John Grimek first tried testosterone in the mid-1950s after Dr. Ziegler found out that the Russians were using testosterone on their Olympic weightlifting athletes. I mean, if testosterone didn't work for you 10 to 15 years ago, why would you try it again? To me, that just doesn't make any sense. And as Albert Einstein said, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing again and expect a different outcome. John Grimek, of course, saw no effect with testosterone and dismissed the drug as having any anabolic properties in the mid-1950s when he had already retired from the sport of bodybuilding and weightlifting. Some may argue that by the mid-1950s, testosterone enanthate was available with a longer half-life, and this is a valid point. And perhaps this is the reason why John Grimek decided to try testosterone in the 1950s. But I repeat, it is well documented that even such advanced preparations had no effect on John Grimek's strength or muscle mass. This is reported. Now, this brings me to a very important point. If testosterone enanthate had no effect on John Grimek in the mid-1950s, being the most effective form of testosterone at the time, then what makes you think that the prior inferior preparations from the 1930s would? Even if John Grimek or other Silver Era bodybuilders did experiment with these initial preparations of testosterone, be it oral or injectable, they likely had no effect on their physiques at all. Just look at John Grimek's physique in 1935, prior to the discovery of testosterone. He already had developed a very heavy muscular physique without the use of anabolics. His physique doesn't really change much thereafter. Sure, he continues to put on muscle mass over the years, but it appears to be progressive. To further emphasize my point, I would like to quote Professor Jan Todd again, who I talked about in a recent video about the natural limits to hypertrophy. Within this article titled Size Matters, Reflections on Muscle, Drugs and Sport, Professor Todd lists the fat-free mass index of Silver Era bodybuilders, which we can once again see are not different to the fat-free mass index achieved by Bronze Era athletes, with values between 25 and 32, and as we are all very well aware, Bronze Era lifters could not have taken anabolic steroids because they simply did not exist. Now, before I end this video, I do want to point out an important reference Professor John Fair shared with me, and it is this publication he wrote many years ago, which also helps shed light on the use of testosterone and anabolic compounds by athletes. The article is about Professor Charles Kochakian, who was the first scientist to make the connection between anabolics and hypertrophy, and as the initial experiment he performed was on dogs. He proved that androstenedione was an anabolic substance from as early as 1936. The article also demonstrates what I have talked about in a previous video, and that is that in the 1940s, testosterone and other anabolic hormones were indicated for hypogonadism, depression, and other ailments, and experimental research was being performed for treating diseases like cancer and diabetes, wound healing, and in some cases, even prescribed for women. Initial research on the possible anabolic effect on humans was first performed during World War II, although no clinical research was performed on actual human subjects. I think all this medical research is important to mention because it puts things into context regarding the use of testosterone at the time and the medical knowledge about it. So that wraps up this video for today. I do hope you have enjoyed this video on John Grimek's letter, where he was inquiring about testosterone in 1943, along with advertisements of anabolic substances that appeared in bodybuilding magazines, and the Bill Barrett interview claiming that Silver Era bodybuilders use testosterone. If you have enjoyed the video, please give the video a like, subscribe, and I am dying to hear your comments. So please go ahead and let me hear what you've got to say. I know that this video will ruffle the feathers and cause a big stir in the bodybuilding community. And I will be following this topic further with an interview with Dante and an interview really, or a discussion with Dante from Natty Life, as we are interested in keeping the discussion going. Until then, that's it from me. This is the Golden Era Bookworm saying bye for now. Head to www.goldenerabookworm.com for the biggest range of classic old school bodybuilding books as ebooks, e-magazines such as Iron Man and Reg Park Journal, high quality bodybuilding posters of the Golden Era stars, merchandise and classic gymwear featuring Steve Reeves, Marvin Eder, John Grimek, Reg Park, and many other Golden Era stars. For those wishing to build a classic physique, lose fat and build muscle, online training is also available. Collectibles such as rare autographed photos from the Golden Era stars are also available, and to collaborate, please get in touch. As a natural bodybuilder, it is imperative to know your own testosterone levels, as they are a reflection of the anabolic environment created by your diet and training. I would highly recommend using the male hormone test kit from Let's Get Checked, and make sure you use my code GOLDEN30 for a 30% discount. Again, the advantage of checking yourself regularly is that you will know how well your body is anabolically primed to put on the much desired muscle you are working for. Not all of us have the time to go to a gym or the opportunity to have a coach to teach us one-on-one, but with the Future Fitness app, it's like having a personal trainer in your living room. From February 11th onwards, you can try the Future Fitness app for only $19 for the first month. Think of what you can accomplish during that first month. So go on and hit my link at tryfuture.co/GEB to get started.